Coming up on ReFramed.
Along with this week's special guest, Maya Dove. Today we'll be discussing Derry Girls.
I love this show. It's super fun.
I am obsessed with this show.
Although I feel so old sometimes.
You don't need to have a moment where someone be like, I am me and this is my disability.
Welcome back to ReFramed, the podcast that reframes how disability is portrayed in film and TV. I'm your co-host Jason Clamo, and today I have Stephanie Dow with me as my wonderful co-host, along with this week's special guest, Maya Dove. Today we'll be discussing Derry Girls, but before we do, let's say hello to Maya and learn a little bit more about her. So welcome to the podcast, Maya. Did you just want to start off by letting us all know a bit about you and what you do?
Yeah, so hi, my name's Maya Dove. I'm 23 years old and I'm a model and actress based in Melbourne. I've been modelling and acting for about 4 years now, and I also have a physical disability. I've had a spinal cord injury since birth, and that's why I'm really passionate about seeing disability representation in the media. But I also like to advocate for people with disabilities, just because from my own lived experience, I feel like that is a cause that I'm really passionate about, and I like, especially working with young people. I find that due to having a disability since birth, pediatric care and those that kids that living with disability is a really passionate area of mine, because I feel like that's what I experienced, and I like to be a voice for people that can't really speak for themselves sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so important to take that experience that you've had and to use it to try and help others along the way. So I think that kind of feeds into my question for you is why is it so important for film and TV and other screen media to represent disability on the screen in an inclusive, accessible
Well, I think in Australia, there's around 4 million people that are currently living with a disability, and I think that if you're not including that in your representation in the media, you're missing out on a large portion of the population, and it's not accurate representation really if you're leaving out such a large portion of society. And I think also, if you don't include disabled people in your representation, then your product and form of media, it's not diverse. And if you're excluding disabled people from that, then it's exclusion, but also it's not accurate.
Yeah, I love that, like how simple that is too.
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard that before, Steph, of it just being like, it's just not accurate. Like
Yeah.
there's 4 million of us, and if you don't even include one of us, it's just not actually the way the world is. I really like that. Like I always bang on about, which is important, but like always bang on about it, is like the business case of it all too, which I think, tying in, there's 4 million of us, that's a lot of money, an untapped market that they're just leaving on the table, I guess. It's not all about money, but I think a lot of the time in these industries as well, a lot of it is about money. And I don't know how else to make it clearer. And I think there's a lot of people out there sharing the same message too, that there's a lot of money on the table. Like, if you
And
start
there's
representing us really well, like we're going to start spending money with you. So,
and there's so many people that you could employ. There's so many disabled models and actors that you could be giving work to. So again, that benefits society because you're giving people a job. Also, if you're not including disability representation, then what message are you sending out to young disabled people? I know for me, definitely not seeing people that had my body shape, because we all talk about body positivity and accurate representation of different bodies. But if you're not seeing a disabled body, what message are you giving to disabled kids, and especially disabled young teens who are already feeling so insecure and going to school where you're different? And if you're not seeing, okay, it's okay that I'm different because that person looks like me and they're doing really well. So if you don't show that, then it just has a flow on effect, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's you can't be what you can't see. And, if you're not seeing that positive reflection of yourself on screen in any capacity, then how does that affect your self-worth, your self-value? It's a big issue, and one that I think is only just sort of, I guess, being talked about more now from a disability perspective, and having, voices like yourself, and hopefully, this podcast and that is shaping that for the better. Yeah.
I think like taking that like one step further too, just before we wrap up, is that it's also informing the perceptions of everybody else in society. Like, yes, it is informing like internalized ableism in people with disability, especially probably young people who are probably more like us. Like we're young people still, I guess. Although I feel so old sometimes. But we are very like impressionable from mainstream media and TV and film and like music industry, all of those creative industries where we live, we spend our time there. So, but everybody else, I guess, like non-disabled people, their perceptions of us are also informed from all those places. So, for me, I think that's also like probably one of the most important parts about it is, creating that positive change in people's perceptions of disability and people with disability. Because I get questions sometimes about like, but what difference is it going to make to someone's thoughts of you, or what difference does it make for you, as in me as a disabled person in the real world, if you see someone like you represented? I'm like, every time I go for a job interview, or like anytime I'm out in public, I can assure you that a non-disabled person has preconceived ideas about what I can and can't do in that space, and that will affect the care I get, the work opportunities, education, all of it. So, um, yeah, that's my TED talk. Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. And societal behavior is influenced by what they consume. So if you're consuming um, any form of media that's not including or that's portraying some form of ableism, even if it's not blatant, but if you're not including that, then you are sending out a message that people, even unconsciously, are going to act on or believe.
Cool. I think we're having great convo, but let's spend some time now discussing Derry Girls. So to kick it off, Steph, do you want to just give us a little bit of a descriptor of Derry Girls?
Yeah, so Derry Girls is a British teen drama, comedy drama that follows a group of young girls and one boy, one English boy that, we won't mention that he's English, but following them basically on their, hijinks and adventures. And it's very Irish. It's set in the 90s, so it's looking at the rebellion and all of those sort of troubled times back then. But this group of girls and boy are just having fun and being typical teenagers, and just getting by, as best they can. So I love this show. It's super fun. I just, it's been a while. I feel like since I've watched a comedy where I'm literally laughing out loud, like consistently the entire show. So I guess that's one aspect. Maya, like, what are your thoughts? Um, do you enjoy it?
I am obsessed with this show. I've rewatched it twice. I rewatched it before the final season came out, and I binge watched the whole entire last season, I think, in a day. And I just think it's so funny. And because I went to a Catholic school, it's just so accurate. I remember in one of the first episodes, she's complaining about being like having to wear her blazer and saying, "Oh, I'm going to be individual today." And I just remember that was like a really big point when I was in high school and had to wear like full blazer and tie and tights and everything. So I just think the societal representation is quite accurate and quite true to the times and to the life of a group of teens, which I think is really funny. Um, and the characters, they're all just so good in their own right. I did an audition a couple of weeks ago, and the girl with the cousin
Oh,
I forgot her name is.
Ola.
No, the cousin of the boy.
Uh, oh, Michelle.
Yeah, I was like watching clips of her to try and like kind of replicate that character for this person that I was auditioning as. Um, and because it's just the writing and the acting is just so good because all of the characters are so different. It's just really well done. Yeah.
Yeah, it is very, very funny. I guess like the reason we're talking about it is it is disability representation throughout the series. You know, I know as well, which is like the main one that you brought up with me, Maya, is that there's some like cameo appearances, I believe, of an actor with cerebral palsy in season 3. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's funny. I have I've missed a few episodes in season 2, but there's peppered disability representation in season 3, especially towards the end of the season. Um, was there Maya? Was there more that in than in season 3, or was that sort of where it really kind of ramped up a bit
Was
more?
season 3 the last season of the series? Yeah, yeah. I think that was the season that had the disability representation in it. They had two, so they had a person with short stature as a news anchor, and then they had another boy as a student, which I and both was quite well done.
Yeah, I believe the news anchor was that Sinead
Yeah,
Burke?
yeah,
I think it was.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm pretty
Um,
sure I've seen you around. Yeah.
yeah, I saw it. I was like, "Hang on a second, I know you, yeah."
Yeah.
And yeah, there were a couple of, there were even a couple of other short-statured people. I think in a couple of episodes as well, which is great to see. And yeah, one I saw one wheelchair, and I think that was his name was Eamon in real life, and he has cerebral palsy. Yeah, but that one was just for a very, like, literally 2 seconds in a funeral procession, so I'm not sure if that really, I guess, like, incidental representation, which is something we've talked about where, like, they're not a character per se with speaking lines, but they're you see a wheelchair in amongst the crowd kind of thing, so that incidental representation was there, but, yeah.
Yeah, and I think like as important as I think like those parts of representation are, I think as well like we're so ready to see lead characters with disability and like somebody with disability taking on like this like nice chunky like fun role.
And we need
One
a
interesting thing I think I've seen is that like people are debating whether or not Ola, the main character, is autistic. And I didn't know what the two of you thought about that. Like, I have some thoughts and I'll share them, but I'm going to give the microphone over first.
I think there are definitely character traits that do pop out to me, but um, I don't know. It's really hard to tell. But I do know that the character is non-binary. So when the skirt that they all wear, she's wearing a skirt, or they're wearing a skirt, because Ola is non-binary, which I think that's another bit of cool representation that they never say it, but it's just the fact that this character is non-binary. Because even I think they do say it though, because I know James says, "Oh, but I'm a boy. Like I'm a boy. More like I'm a boy." And Ola goes, "Hey, I wouldn't attest to that. Like that's like
Yeah, yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
such an
Yeah.
incidental
I did
line."
forget
Yeah,
about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's so yeah, there's a lot of gender jokes
yeah,
in the series with James
mm.
obviously being an honorary Derry girl,
Yeah.
um, um, which is really fun. But Ola's such an interesting character. As you said, Maya, like there are certainly traits in that character that could be identified with autism or a condition like that, but yeah, I don't know. For me, that's when I was watching the character. That's not what came to mind. I just saw, I guess, a bit of an eccentric character that was being exactly. The mum is a bit, in her own world as well. So However, I did, yeah, this is where my background research comes in. I did do a little bit of reading, and um, from season one, the actress that plays the role, Louisa Holland, she got quite a lot of people writing to her that live with autism or other conditions like that, thanking her for her portrayal because they felt seen on screen. And it was interesting because they also said, that it's something that while it's not identified in the show, um, this is obviously set in the early 90s. And a lot of women and girls back then, it wasn't identified in them back then. They were masking, or it just, autism was something for boys. It wasn't something that girls were acknowledged having. So yeah, they had a lot of people writing to her about that kind of like they weren't seen back then, but they feel seen now. So
And I feel like
I thought that was quite.
yeah, I think that's because that's so interesting. I'm really glad that the audience felt like they could do that. But I also think that in film and TV, you don't need to have a moment where someone be like, I am me and this is my disability. Like, I feel like you don't need to do that. Like, if you had a wheelchair user, it would be a waste of time to be like, hi, I'm me. And when I was 4, I was in a car accident and now I use a chair. Like, I feel like that's just, they did it in Glee and I was like, it's a bit unnecessary. Like, we know you're in a wheelchair, you know, have a disability. Like, just have the person be there as it is and just move on.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, I think, with like invisible disability, though. And I guess like I was asking because, Steph, I know that in the past we've had conversations about like representations of autistic people. So let's throw back to that one example, which is the Big Bang Theory. And it's never actually identified throughout however many seasons of the Big Bang Theory and all the kind of, I guess, trials and tribulations the characters all go through together. And I guess what I would say is I think the issue comes in when there's a main character who provides comic relief because of typically autistic traits, but then the other side of their whole, like, there was no other facet to their lives. That's where the problem comes in. Or there's no opportunity to actually unpack any of the kind of ableism or hardship that they actually experience. Like the Big Bang Theory, it's all just made into comedy,
And it's
when actually a lot
infantilized
of it,
too.
yeah, and when you look at it actually and think about it, he's not treated well at all a lot of the time. People don't
That
actually
is
typically treat him well.
that is something that I will say that Derry Girls did well with the Ola character is I don't feel like she was ever infantilized, like perhaps some Sheldon was in The Big Bang Theory. She was one of the like they looked at her oddly occasionally because of she'd say something a bit bizarre or she would do step aerobics, in front of the whole school or something like
And they
that.
were
But
considerate of her sensitivity to, arguments within the group or big events, but I don't think they were ever like, poor Orla, we need to shield her. They never shielded her. They just were like, she was upset, they'd be like, oh, poor thing, like, it's okay, don't stress. Yeah.
and they never they while other people maybe got some comedic relief from her behaviors or what she would say sometimes, the main characters, the friendship group, they never really laughed at her. They were her equals, which I thought they did really well. It's really hard as well with you know see that was done really well. Big Bang Theory and things like this, these are purely comedies. And while you can say things, it's kind of like how deep can you go with something that's a hard, it's kind of like treading the line. And yeah, I don't think Big Bang Theory did it particularly well. Derry Girls showed that you can do it well.
Yeah.
And
And I think it's
and
that thing where it's like if you can't take it to that depth, you kind of need to be blatant about the fact that it is disability. Otherwise, it feels exploitative. Like it's like you're exploiting those traits of autistic people. I think it's time we give our scores on the inclusive disability representation scale. I guess when you're giving your scores, thinking about the show as a whole, did they represent disability enough? When they did they do it well? Steph, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, yeah. I wish I could give like two scores, like one for how much I just enjoy the show and think it's a really great show.
I mean, I won't
Because I think
stop you, but the one score we're going to share with the world and that's going to pop
I
up on your little
know
screen is going to be
a
your
little
IDR score.
I know it's a little bit like I just love the show. I enjoy it so much. In terms of disability representation, the what they did do, I thought was done quite well, but there was so little of it. There was like tiny little cameos like right at the end of the series, and yes, perhaps Orla could be considered disability representation throughout, but because it wasn't like 100% like sure that it was disability representation, it's hard to kind of base it around that. So I think for me, I'd have to give it maybe a 3.5 out of 5. Because again, what they did, I actually think they did really well. But yeah, just if they want to get it up to the 5, the extra 1.5, they need it literally from the beginning of the show and do so much more of it.
Yeah,
Because
we've gotten harsher. All right.
Yeah.
We're
100%.
requesting more if you want a 5 out of 5.
That's right. You got to earn it now.
Exactly. Work for it. Maya, what was your score?
Well, yeah, just because I love the show, I do wish I could rate it higher and score it higher, just due to my love for the show and the whole storyline and just how it's done. But I think because of there was, like you said, there was just so minimal portrayal throughout the whole entire series as a whole. I'm gonna have to actually give it a 1.5, to be honest, because even though I do
damn,
like
harsh.
how I know, I'm gonna have to give it a 1.5 because even though I do like it, yeah, even though I do like it, and how I do like how it was done, I do like how they had these disabled supporting roles, and it was just they were roles that an able-bodied person could have played, but out of the whole entire series, they probably only had like 2% of the whole entire storyline. And these actors didn't actually have a benefit to the storyline, they were just supporting. So I think to be better, I would have liked it if one of the main characters or a reoccurring character was had an actual disability that was noticed. So then they could have really portrayed it instead of just it being like a little tick of the box at the end. Even though they did do it very well, they did it very well. But to get higher, they need to have like, why can't there be a person with a disability in the friendship group or as a parent or a teacher? Why
It'd be
couldn't the
really
principal
interesting actually when we release this episode, because I did kind of come in and I was like, giving benefit of the doubt, like if they had, because Steph, like that whole explanation you gave earlier about it being 90s, girls traditionally weren't like diagnosed very well. I had come in with that exact same thought, and I was like, giving them the benefit of the doubt of this like ultra clever storyline placed in like time with like, undiagnosed because of that, like, et cetera, et cetera. I was like, this is amazing. Like, I was going to give it like a 4.5, but it's really interesting. And I think I'm still going to give it the benefit of the doubt and give it a 4.5 because I feel like I believe that Ola is autistic, undiagnosed. But what I wish, and probably what would have actually made me go to a 5, and I think what they could have done is off screen, just make it clear. Like they've done it with Ola's gender identity. So why could they not have done it with disability? So, that's the part I think that is probably a letdown. And I think it's the part that, like we've said with the Big Bang Theory and a bunch of other shows, it's like executives on set are just still too scared, I think, to take it there. Like they're too scared that, oh, well, if we say that it is and we get it wrong, we're going to get cancelled. And I'm like, that's the the harmful nature of cancel culture. But I kind of understand where they're coming from.
I think also people like producers and writers and that behind the scenes need to realize that if you can still have the comedy there. You don't have to lose the comedy, but if that comedy is coming from an authentic place, Like we know, like people with disabilities, particularly like talking to each other as well, like we can be hilarious. We are funny people.
Yeah. And also
Because
some of the shit we deal with is kind of funny
yeah,
sometimes. We
it's
laugh
actually
about
funny.
it. Yeah.
So comedy can come from an authentic place.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be afraid to lose that aspect, but using these characters as a punchline, and not sort of, having that authenticity behind the scenes, it kind of just muddies the waters a bit. And, yeah, as you said, everyone's very risk averse and scared of cancel culture. But if you have that authenticity behind the scenes, you it's hard to get canceled because you've done the right thing. So it's yeah.
Well, this has been so much fun. I want to say a quick thank you to the two of you for joining me. Um, it's been an amazing episode. It's so fun, I guess, to be back and recording these episodes. Derry Girls is such a funny show, although I was giving it benefit of the doubt and I gave it a good score. The two of you maybe not so much. I would recommend everybody goes and watches it and gives it a chance.
That's the joy of the IDR
Yeah,
score because everyone has their own opinions, and we've got a
exactly.
really good scale tonight. I think that's really
I think
cool.
it's one of the first times we've like disagreed this much. Can you believe it?
It's because we
Yeah,
just
no,
love the show. It's just because we love the show so much
exactly.
that we
It's
know
contentious.
what they do good and what they could have done.
Yeah, exactly.
If you love someone, you want them to be the best they can
Yes.
be,
Yes.
right?
How we feel about the show. No, amazing. I'd recommend everybody who follows along with this episode of ReFramed to go check out Derry Girls. Tell us what you think. Do you think Orla should have been autistic representation? How do you think they could have done that better? Tell us what your IDR scores would be. You can follow us on social media, or you can send us an email at hello@reframedpodcast.com. And lastly, I just want to say a huge thank you as well to the Community Broadcasting Foundation for helping to fund this series. And that's it for this week's ep. And we will see you again next week. Bye. This has been a production of Attitude Foundation.